Still good, Ben? Terry, still good? Okay, Colleen? I'd like to call this Saline City Council work meeting to order at, I guess, 6:01 p.m. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Morrow, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, Council Members CO, Dillon, Delorco, Kamir, Sulek, and Kraus. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, City Clerk Royal, and Assistant City Manager Getzman. At this time, the chair would be happy to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments. Moved by Dillon, seconded by CO, I believe. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences. We come now to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who'd like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. The record reflects that this work meeting there are no citizen comments. Then we proceed to the one and only discussion item, which is the proposed ethics policy. City Manager O'Toole, would you like to begin?
So at this point, the draft ethics policy that you have before you has been reviewed by both Labor Council and General Council and taken twice now, well, 3 times really, but twice in earnest to the Code Review Committee with inputs from members of that group. There are a few comments emerging from this draft at the Code Review level that I will highlight. One is under Section 2-1. There was substantial discussion around determining what constituted a monetary gift and how to treat that process for either denying the gift or returning the gift or disclosing as opposed to outright rejecting. There is at least one state statute that governs this process. That's Act 472 of 1978 and as subsequently amended. So the kind of prevailing comment from there is that perhaps this section should be changed in favor of just simply referencing that act. The second section of substantial consideration was Chapter 3, Section 3-1. That is regarding the creation of the Board of Ethics. The alternatives were presented at the last Code Review Committee. The comments that came out of that, there was strong consensus for recommending that all members of the body be public members and no member from City Council, but that the members should have the discretion to engage third parties if it becomes necessary. There was also some comments around ensuring that there's a diversity of voices on the composition of that board, and certainly ensuring that all members are City of Saline residents. Other than that, the only change that the Code Review Committee had is in red under Section 4-1 under penalties. They added a verbal or written admonishment in addition to that list. Otherwise, I would open it up now for council comments and any direction you may have for me on how to further revise or either incorporate those comments or not.
I only have one comment, and I'll defer to Councilmember Delorco if he'd like to speak in his capacity as the liaison to the Code Review Committee. When you talked about, it's in Section 2.1, that there's already a prevailing state statute that refers to this. I believe it's a public act from 1978. I think it would be cleaner just to reference the public act, since that takes precedence. Other than that, I think that this looks good, and the goal here this evening at the conclusion of our work meeting is to get as close to consensus as possible, and then have this come back for discussion and hopeful approval at either our next meeting or our first meeting in September. Mr. Delorco, is there anything you'd like to add in your capacity as the liaison to the Code Review Committee?
Not much. I think City Manager O'Toole did an excellent job of summarizing what was discussed over the last several rounds of drafts as this ethics ordinance moved to the Code Review Committee and then reverted back to a policy. At the point it reverted back to a policy, there was some reticence on behalf of the Code Review Committee to get too in the weeds on having a recommendation for the council, because this is now a policy matter and it needs to be handled here at the council table. But we did all have a strong prevailing consensus that the Ethics Board Commission should be made up of an entirely independent body as members of the public.
Very good. Okay. Well, let me, excuse me, start to my right and end to my left. Councilmember Kraus, I'll begin with you. Questions or comments? We'll limit this to 5 minutes. I'm sure we'll have around time for a second and maybe even third round if necessary. So you may begin when ready.
Thanks. I too am okay with the referencing the Act 472, was it? It seems like that we don't want to reinvent the wheel on that. My one problem with the whole thing is what code review, it looks like they've already talked about, is having a member assigned from council. I don't understand, I understand that that person would not be a voting person, but what is the point of that before I make my decision as to what, if I like it or not? What's the point of that? Like, that we would have a council rep on there?
So the original comment from our general counsel was simply that any body of the city really should have council representation, but there didn't appear to be any specific for or against, in terms of a legal opinion, why one would need or not need to be on there. It's really our discretion. So at this point, I think the consensus that I heard from code review is they didn't see the value in having a council person who should be a truly public body. And that's probably the direction I would lean as well in my recommendation.
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something. I too don't see the need to have a city council member on that board, whether they're voting or not, if we're going to keep the independence there. Just merely having a council member sit in there can be daunting, or what's the word I'm looking for? I would not be in favor of that, barring any further information coming through. Other than that, looks good.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Kraus. Councilmember Kamir Sulek, you have 5 minutes for questions or comments.
Yes, thank you. I think Ms. O'Toole explained it very thoroughly, and I appreciate going the number of times we've gone over this. And I concur as well. I don't think it's appropriate to have a council member even in the room. That just I think would create problems and detract from the fairness and additional problems that could come from that. So I would feel more comfortable without a council member involved.
Easy enough. Thank you, Mr. Kamir Sulek. Councilmember Seal, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe that reference to the Public Act is appropriate. Excuse me. In reading through, I thought probably best to have 3 members of the public at large and no member of council. The only reason I could see to have a member of council on the committee would be if there was some question about the appropriate role or function of council. Maybe a council person could lend some insight there to their deliberation. But I believe, like my colleagues, that it's probably best without. So that's how I.
Easy enough. Councilmember Dillon, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So I guess starting at the beginning, under definitions, I wasn't sure because when we talk about elected official or official, it says a person who holds office by election. And so someone that's an appointed outside of an election should still, in my opinion, be held to the same standard as someone that is elected. If you're a part of city council, you're the same whether you're elected or appointed into it. So it does say, because it actually says above under government contract that a person that serves as an employee or an appointed elected official of the city. So I would like to see some clarification as to that.
I think we could easily add language in that stipulates that includes any members of city council who are appointed outside of the election cycle.
Okay. Yeah, so, yeah, and then sort of cleaning up where under the government contract piece.
I think unless there's objection from the dais, City Manager O'Toole, you're instructed subsequent to this meeting to clean up language wherever it makes reference to elected, to expand that to include individuals who may be appointed to this body. For a
Yeah,
period of time.
I can correct the definition of elected official, and then that way carry elected official throughout, and that
Right.
definition will stand.
I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a reason that we were not
No.
That there wasn't some
We would want it to
differential
apply,
between-
yeah, we'd want it
Okay.
to apply to any member.
Okay. Then section 2.4, personal opinion, and I would hope that we could add some language where it says personal opinion as that of the city of Saline or on behalf of council, something like that, so that when somebody's making a statement, they're speaking for themselves, not for the body.
I'm sorry, could you,
It's
so.
2.4.
Or the council body?
Yeah, or on behalf of council, yes, or whatever it would be, something like that. And then there were, so just to clarify, like the nepotism rules and things like that, council could vote to sort of override that. Is that what this is saying? That by a
Yes.
2/3 vote?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, you'd need a heavy majority to support that.
Okay. Is there a reason why we would do it that way, not just a simple majority, that we do everything else?
I will have to confirm, but I believe that's in reference to some state statute.
Okay. Okay. And then there was, and then as far as the Board of Ethics, I'm kind of like all over the place with understanding this. I mean, I'm not sure how I feel about just having lay community members involved in this, because they could have a knowledge base of people involved. I just don't know how impartial that is, and then how do we choose them to make sure, and we decide that that's an impartial body, and it could rotate depending on what the circumstances were. So I guess I would be more in favor of looking at an entity, like we assign it to a law firm that doesn't represent the city, or something like that. I'm not really 100% sure, because we talk about people within the city of Saline, and so it's like, just understanding how impartial they're going to be to the process. It's a small community, and so that piece of it makes me a little concerned. And so kind of understanding that. So I'd like to have a little bit more of a conversation about that. I do agree with what Mr. CEO said about that. I think that a council member on a board to that could bring some sort of value as to what we perceive as the action or the difference, or whatever the case may be, the details to it. Because my biggest concern right now is that your role as city manager is first and foremost to your staff, not to this body. And so there's going to be situations where both parties are involved. It could be a situation where there's a council member and a staff member that are involved. And with that, I've asked this question before, understanding how what trumps what as far as, because your staff has privacy right issues that this body doesn't extend to this body. And so how is that, like, what's representing this body in that action to make sure that it's being worked from both sides? Does that make sense?
Yes, I guess the way that I would approach that, or think it would be appropriate to handle, is if the only issue in question is a complaint of staff, I mean, for example, a harassment complaint of staff against a member of this body, then that would have to be handled by my office because it's a staff member. If there were multiple claims, then they would need to be separated and reviewed and investigated separately. But this body would not be able to handle, it would not be designed to handle issues of staff complaints or any human resource task.
So then, where does, I just don't know what the trigger is then for this ethics and in that instance, because if you're going to be handling it as an internal matter, then where does this come into play?
I mean,
And where do
I
we
would think it
bring
comes into play if after researching it, then I would have to be the complainant in that case. So if a member, to protect the staff's right to privacy, then I would have to be the complainant to say, I've determined that this action was legitimate, here is evidence that I have, and I would likely in that case, to the extent permitted under law, redact information about the individual staff person.
Okay.
Why don't you hang on to that thought,
Okay.
Ms. Dillon, because we're past the 5 minutes.
Okay.
City Manager O'Toole, let me follow up on something that my colleague just addressed, and let me preface, if I'm getting way too far into the weeds here and it's unnecessary, just stop me. But I want to jump back to a section that Ms. Dillon commented on, which is 2.4, personal opinion. There are occasions, there have been a number during my tenure as mayor, especially at the conclusion of a closed session, where city council reconvenes into regular session and then takes official action. And the mayor, and I think on maybe 1 or 2 occasions, in the absence of the mayor pro tem has made an obligatory comment from the dais on behalf of council. So again, I might be really nitpicking here, but there might be the potential for some added verbiage in that section.
To further stipulate that that's permissible specifically, or?
That would be my preference, yeah.
I mean, I would see that falling firmly outside the realm of personal opinion if you know, if it's comments following a closed session, then you're not, you know, it's not you or
Okay.
someone else,
Okay.
you know,
Then I was
making
getting too
personal
deep.
comments, yeah.
I was getting too deep in the weeds there.
And
Okay.
certainly, anytime you preface a comment with, this is my personal opinion,
Sure.
then you have absolved yourself of, you know, violating that particular section of this policy.
Fair enough, okay? Mayor Pro Tem Gearba, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple I'll go through. Regarding the gift and loans favors, I have no issue with referring to Act 472, but would like to know how different it is based on what this information is here in terms of dollar level and anything else.
If someone's willing to run to the printer, I printed a copy of that section off. Thought you or Janet might have that question. I just forgot to grab it before I came in.
It'd just be helpful to understand because I know similar language.
Yeah.
I had to do it. in the other-
So the difference is the state statute has a $25 limit on gifts. And I believe there's some fluctuation to that amount over time, but I'm not familiar enough with the statute to how that changes. But I printed out a copy of that section specifically. If you compare it to what's in this policy, it's extremely close in language already, other than that dollar figure amount, in terms of how it presents what constitutes a gift or favor.
The other one would be public resources, making sure to understand, giving some examples to clarify that misuse of public resources and such. I mean, we have some general ideas or whatever, but it might be more clarifying, especially with campaign. I think there are some specific campaign language that we might want to refer to also based on the state of Michigan.
Which section is that, Mr. Gearba?
Section 2-5. And then just under, when we look at the other issues like personal and financial interests, and where it says, if you have any permits or certificates, other regulations and such. So if I'm participating with Main Street or with Celtic Festival or the Historical Society or any of those other organizations that come before us, are we expanding it to that degree of excluding ourselves?
No, because really the intent here is for you to have personal interest is a value to you. So what you described were all volunteer organizations that the city may have dealings with, but you don't personally or financially benefit from.
Even if we serve as one of the officers of those organizations?
I mean, I can ask for further clarification, but my guess is going to be no. You'd still be permitted to vote on those actions and weigh in favor of those actions if that was your interest.
Just because being in that situation, and many of the other members have served in those kind of positions with other groups. Also, in the example, the paragraph that follows, I know if you're already serving in a role or in a staff role or serving as an elected or appointed official, and then your spouse is elected or something like that, how will we handle it in terms of a management plan after that situation, should it occur?
So in a situation where two members of the body are?
Yeah, say that I'm serving on planning commission, my partner gets elected as a
Oh,
council
after the
member.
fact,
After
yeah.
the fact, will we have a management plan in place to maintain that clarification?
I would assume in that situation, the way to handle it would be upon the renewal of that person's position or appointment, that they would no longer, under the new rules, be permitted to be reappointed. Though I think that may ultimately fall to the discretion of council in this policy if they want to stipulate something different.
And then under the annual disclosure statement, in those examples, will we have to disclose holding permits, asking requests for license, all those type of things that potentially a citizen or an elected official could do in terms of remodeling a house or property or any of that situation?
So are you talking about like if you
Say you had a building
request
or you had a
permits for
house,
your
require-
property?
Correct.
Like a rental property?
No, any property.
Oh, okay.
Rental, your personal home, those have always come up as an issue where individuals say, well, you own a home in town, you shouldn't be voting on that because you have a direct interest in that. But we've always looked at it from a material perspective. But I'm looking at this just to understand exactly what we need to be disclosing. So again, something to,
Yeah, I mean,
clarify.
if it's going through a contractor, the way that I read this is no, you wouldn't need to, because you're not financially benefiting from that process. I'll clarify with legal, I mean, you may have to disclose if it's you personally pulling the permits, but,
that's just kind of that thing because you never know what
yeah.
could be interpreted in that way. And then I agree that on the Board of Ethics, there shouldn't be a city council member on it. A greater concern on that one is I would much rather have a third, not even have a citizens group, but I'd rather have a third party that's not connected at all with potential memberships or the council or whatever. But I'll go with whatever the majority wants to do on that one. And then lastly, the time frame. Have we clarified on how quickly we're going to be notified as to if an issue occurs and what is being investigated? And it says if somebody files a complaint, it says within 5 days we'll notify them that they're complaining and everything. But I would like to know the timeline and have it in writing as to that it will be resolved within 30 days, 45 days, because the issue that we came into recently was the problem that it really never got resolved in a timely manner.
So are you talking about the timeline for when it will be, that a complaint was received? Like when council as a body will receive notice of that, or when?
Both, notice of it and when it's going to be resolved and periodic updates. So some type of timeline that basically says, you know, we notify council that an issue's been, or council's notified an issue's been brought up. Within 35 or within 30 to 45 days, the information has to be resolved, and so it's dealt on. It cannot be dragged out for months and months on end.
Yeah, I'll confer with legal counsel to see if there's any particular guidance on that subject, but I'm sure that we can require, certainly we can require that hearings occur within a specific amount of time.
Perfect. And I think I'm almost up with my 5 minutes. So I'll move on.
Okay. Yeah, I think that might, to Mr. Gearbaugh's point, City Manager, so that might be a way to resolve that particular inquiry that he proposed. I think there should be a mechanism whereby council is notified quickly, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to tie staff hands or legal counsel's hands to a date certain as to when the matter needs to be resolved. Depending on the complexity or size of the complaint, it may require, additional time. I do want to say too, and I would need to think about this a little bit more, but I do understand the concerns raised by Ms. Dillon and Mr. Gearbaugh and others about an independent body. And I do have some concern, having now occupied this position for a decade, recruiting, appointing, having council confirm the appointments of people who may sit in judgment of our actions. So I do think it's worth maybe a future conversation about how that can be better handled and maybe engaging an independent third party who has less of a direct contact with council as a specific individual who can provide that. So just food for thought. Mr. Delorco, please, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think most of my positions on the issue are consistent with my colleagues. I'm certainly in favor of referring to the state statute for the definition of gifts, and that will simplify that procedure cleanly. And the need to emphasize the independent body was important to the Code Review Committee, as well as most of my colleagues at the dais here today, and myself included. That would warrant further discussion on how we can best assemble the independent body. I think there's some concern over citizens being too entrenched in the community to have an unbiased perspective, so that's certainly worth more discussion. And just keeping the Ethics Commission, government ethics is all about conflicts between the public interest and the personal interest of government officials and employees. That's how I see the issue. And I think the sentiment on code review is that the last place conflict should exist is at the heart of the government ethics program. And that's really all I have.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Delorco. We'll do another round. Councilmember Kraus, anything else?
We might need, like Mr. Delorco said, another more deliberation on that. Might not be a hill I would be willing to die on, but as separate from the city as possible being the key word there. And then Ms. Dillon, what you and Mr. Seo also alluded to as far as having someone on council. I appreciate those comments, but I will stand firm on that. We've seen between the 7 of us, often we don't agree either. So you're saying that council person on this board could provide clarification? No, I mean, that's clarification to me might be different to you. And so I will firmly stand in my opinion, in my voting, that there should be no council member at all dealing on that board. There's too much leeway for opinions or gray areas. And depending on I don't want to say what side of the issue we're on because that's not proper lingo, but depending on our experiences and where we fall on whatever the ethics issue is that's at hand, that could definitely skew, even if you don't intend to. Otherwise, looks like we're doing good everywhere else. That's it.
Fair enough. Mr. Mayor Sulak.
Yeah, just a couple quick things. For me, for clarification with a council member, it comes down to who decides what needs what needs clarification and how we go about that. So that leads me to feel more strongly for an independent third body. The question still remains, who is that independent third body? I don't think we would want the hourly rate of 3 attorneys doing this, but I think that's a decision that we need to make, what this third body is. And really, that's all I have.
Okay, very good. Mr. Seo, anything else?
Well, I agree with Mr. Camaro-Sulak that I'm not sure that we can engage a third party without being responsible somehow for pay. And I wouldn't want that to be an issue of payment and then concern over how long they deliberated because of the amount of money involved and so on. It seems to me like we could find an independent body of 3 people within the community that we could entrust with this kind of a responsibility without necessarily worrying about them being, even though it is a small community, relatively speaking, without them being unduly impacted by some kind of prejudice or favoritism or so on. So I think we could still find an independent body within the community of three reasonable persons.
Very good. Ms. Dillon, additional 5 minutes?
Okay, that point I'm struggling with, and so I think I would like to get clarification as to the responsibility for costs at that point. Is that something that would fall onto the city? Would it fall onto the body? How would that piece play out?
My assumption would be it would be the responsibility of the city. I mean, this isn't in a court of law, so this body wouldn't be able to pass those costs on to an individual if they were found, if the claims were found to have merit. We're not passing a judgment. We can't levy that fine against someone. So if we're talking about hiring a third party, it's going to be let's assume it's at the cost of the city, but I can do more research.
Okay. I think that's a big factor for me, because I do stand firm that I think it should be an independent outside of the community. It is just too small of a community. Just look at all of the circles in which we have, how many of those intertwine, and trying to find three people that are not connected to any of this body is going to be hard pressed to find that one rock that somebody's under. And finding three of those rocks, I think, is going to be very difficult. I don't want to use the rest of my time without kind of moving on. I did have a couple of questions. When we talk about section 3.7, I'm really sort of stuck on this. It's time limits. And it says a complaint must be filed with the clerk within 1 month of the date of the offense is alleged to have occurred. I guess I'm not sure about that, because I don't know how we determine that 1 month is, and 1 month I will never agree to that as a phrase, because it needs to be 30 days, is it 28 days, is it 31 days? Does it count holidays? So I think we need to kind of look beyond that. But understanding, there's times when it takes a while for this to sort of flush itself out. And if you're saying that you would have to do an investigation on the city side of things before they even came through, that could definitely be longer than a month. So understanding why that's there and trying to figure out, should it just be something generic, a reasonable amount of time? I don't understand that piece.
The impression I got from the attorney conversations was it just needs to be a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
Regarding your comments, if I'm conducting an investigation related to a personnel matter, then the complainant ultimately would be me from the time that I made a determination on the HR issue. So it wouldn't necessarily be 30 days from when that instance occurred. It would be 30 days from my making a determination of a harassment violation or something, some code of conduct violation of city policies.
Okay, I don't think it reads that way, because it's saying 1 month, within 1 month of the date of the offense, is alleged to have occurred.
So we could change it to alleged to have occurred or determined through.
And what if it
Yeah.
takes somebody 6 months to get up the courage to say, yes, I was sexually harassed?
Well, so this is a policy decision. If you think if this body feels it should be 6 months, then we can make it 6 months.
Right.
Certainly I can work on wordsmithing, adding in language about the time that it takes for any internal processes to play out.
Right. I guess I'd look for a little bit of guidance from this board about it. I think that reasonable time frame seems very generic, and it could be very open-ended. But, putting a firm date also seems very narrow. So I'm not sure where we find that bridge in between. So that's something I'd like to further discussion on. The other thing is, as we go into chapter 4, under penalty, it was added policy based on preponderance of evidence. So I guess understanding that, and that's evidence preponderance of evidence from this authority, from, I mean, I guess understanding what exactly that means.
Well, so preponderance of evidence is a legal term. It means that you have to actually provide information that proves the point.
Right.
So it can't just be a compelling reason. It's different in the sense that there has to be actual documentation to the effect that supports the claim.
Right. Okay, but I guess I just want to make sure that where that's coming from.
That actually came from one member of the code review committee.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
apologize. Where the evidence, like that
Oh.
decision process, is that coming from our independent third party? Is it coming from the complainant? I mean, I guess,
I mean, in that case, it would come during the course of the ethics board performing its duties, calling upon the complainant, calling upon the person to have allegedly violated the policy, and asking them each to supply, evidence or support for their cases, for their positions.
okay. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that who was deciding that piece of it. Like, because if I say, yeah, I believe that, I was wronged by council member X, I could have evidence, but this panel may not feel as though it was sufficient. So understanding that piece of it, of, how we get to that final decision process.
Ms. Dillon, I do need to move on. I
Yep,
apologize.
okay, and then I just have one last thing that I will say, and as we go through those 5 possible things, I would like it to have something about says that it's in no specific order, or there's no limitation to the penalty. It's like you don't have to go through, pick one, and then if it's at a certain level, then you move to 2, things like that.
Yeah, and that was, it's not really intended to read as like a step system.
Okay.
So we can play with the wording on that.
Okay, fantastic, thank you.
City Manager O'Toole, my additional comment, based on the remarks of my colleagues, and I'm sure between you and the city clerk, you've taken copious notes, but the issue of the independent body that's going to evaluate and vet these complaints obviously needs some more scrutiny and discussion. So one thing that I would recommend is maybe connect with some of your municipal colleagues elsewhere in the state or region and legal counsel to maybe spitball some other ideas or alternatives, and maybe you can report back at our subsequent council meeting. Sure. Yeah, very good. Mr. Gearbaugh, anything else?
Just a couple. I agree with Ms. Dillon on the time period for section 3-7. Is there not something that we could refer to either from EEOC or from the state of Michigan in this similar type of activity? Because we might as well have, there's some precedence out there in terms of that kind of complaints and such. I think that would be helpful. And then the other question I had was, in terms of the hearings, I take it that the initial hearings will be closed to public. Well, that would be, depends on how the board is established, I guess.
Correct. It would be dependent upon how the board is established and whether I believe either the complainant or the person who the claims are alleged against requests specifically a closed session, in which case it'd have to be kicked back to council regardless.
Okay,
Because only council as a body has that privilege.
got it.
And EEOC has 180 days is the time limit to file a complaint.
That's kind of what I thought. It was something like that, so that would be helpful.
Anything else, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Nope, thank you.
Mr. Delarco, anything else?
I have nothing further.
Okay, we'll do one last round of questions or comments. Councilmember Kraus, anything else?
So weird question. Could we partner with another local municipality and see if they have people and we could swip? Like we would be Mylan's, they would be ours. I mean, it seems like, I think Ms. Dillon's right. I mean, it's a small town. Half of us almost grew up and went to school here. I mean, you can't, those circles, like, just throwing that out.
I mean, I'd be happy to put that question out to my city manager listserv and just say, hey, is anyone else considering the creation of something like this and would want to
It'd be free.
double check each other's work?
I mean, they don't charge us, we don't charge them. We don't want to add money on, like, I think, Jack, you said 3 hours deliberation at 3 lawyers, $300 an hour. I mean, that's going to get pricey. That's all.
Okay, very good. No, good suggestion. Councilmember Commander Sulak, anything else?
Just a little bit to tag on to that. Maybe like we do with, like a hiring committee. we get an expert, a city manager or somebody from a position from a neighboring town, and I wonder what the county does for they must have an ethics policy, and how they do that for the county elected officials.
Mr. CO, anything else?
Just two thoughts. What Ms. Kraus proposes is certainly has merit. I know in the police agencies, when we had a significant issue, maybe a police-involved shooting or something like that, we'd usually bring in another agency to do the investigation to preclude that kind of at least outwardly, the perception there was some kind of bias involved. So that was not uncommon. As a matter of fact, when I was deputy chief here, I went down to Tecumseh and did an investigation in the police department there. And those were always done gratis, if you will. So that probably has some merit. To the time limits, I think we need to set some kind of time limit, whether it's 30 days, 180 days, whatever's reasonable. But I think we need to set some kind of definite parameters so that these people don't feel, whoever they are, they can go on for months and months and months trying to ask all their friends and so on, or get other opinions or develop more information. Some people just never have enough. If they've got a set time limit, then they've got a period within which they must act, given whatever evidence they have at hand. So I think that's fair, too, to the person who's being complained about. They deserve some kind of expeditious adjudication of the matter. So I'd be in favor of time limits, whatever they are.
Very good. Councilmember Dillon, anything else?
So, I guess, and I may have missed it, and I apologize if I did, is there anything about whether or not these matters are kept confidential? Are they public? What is that piece? And like, what duty is, because we're not staff, we fall under, we're sort of in this no man's land. But we are public officials, and we do have, to be forward-facing and transparent. So kind of understanding where that line is of you don't want to defame someone, but you also want to make sure that, I guess I'm just trying to understand, like, do we have to keep things confidential? How does that work, and where's the guidance for that?
I mean, and any of the complaints we received, unless it contained privileged information, something that was discussed in a closed session or privileged information underneath, human resources law, would be subject to FOIA. So it is all, the process is intended to be very transparent. And again, unless there's a specific request for a closed session, these would be open meetings of a body.
Okay. And then my last question is, we have a couple other documents that are sort of floating around. We have like the electronic communications policy. We have, I think this might still be the same one. We've got our policies and procedures. Has anybody just sort of made sure that all of these documents sort of jive together yet? Because I think that's going to be the big piece to make sure that we're not contradicting ourselves in any way.
Yes, that's an extremely fair point, and that is work that will need to be done.
Okay.
Very good. I don't have anything further at this time. Mr. Gearbar, anything else?
I just want to thank the code review and members of our council for looking at this. I didn't realize that we didn't have something like this in place, and I think as we move forward with all our concerns about government, this is a good idea, and I think we can move forward with this. Thank you.
Definitely. Mr. DeLorco, anything else, sir?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay. So, Ms. O'Toole, you've got a little bit of homework, you and staff, and perhaps you can report back, if not at our next meeting, then certainly our first meeting in September.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you so much. If there's nothing further to be brought up this evening, reference the ethics policy, the chair would be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn this work meeting at 6:45, noting that we will start our regular meeting promptly at 7.
So moved.
Moved
Second.
by Gearboss, seconded by Kamira Sulak. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. Colleen, you good to go?
Yep.
Okay. I'd like to call this Saline City Council meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, Council Members Seo, Dillon, Delorco, Kamara, Sulak, and Kraus. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Assistant City Manager Getzman, Treasurer Cole, City Engineer Humphris, and DPW Director Searles, along with Police Chief Radzik. The rest of you who are in the audience this evening, we welcome you. We encourage you to sign in, on the back table to my left. You can also pick up copies of the agenda along with hearing devices. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments.
So moved?
As submitted, Councilmember Dillon?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kraus. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences, so we'll proceed to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments from those in the audience this evening? Then I would defer to the city clerk. Were there any comments provided in writing in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their remarks read at this time? Very good. Then we proceed to the one and only presentation of the evening, which is our street millage. And I believe the city engineer is going to be taking lead on this with perhaps some assistance from DPW and the city treasurer's office. I will get out of your way, Tasha.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to start the presentation, but as Brian indicated, both DPW Director Searles and Treasurer Cole are here with me tonight. I'm going to go through some of the existing projects that we've done. I've got a lot of slides to go through, and I'm going to go through quite quickly to get into some of the meats of why we're here tonight. So, for a brief history, we did pass, the first road millage was passed in 2018. It generates about $500,000 of revenue a year, and we first started collecting money for this in 2019. So I'm going to start with some of the road projects that were done in that time frame, 2019 to present. Elle's going to talk a little bit about some of the funding for that, and then Larry's going to talk about some of the future and what we're looking to do in the future with the road projects here in Saline. So back in 2019, one of the first projects we did was Industrial Drive. This was an MDOT job. It was a mill and fill, a refill of the, basically in between the curb road work only. In 2020, we had just finished our asset management program and started looking at our infrastructure as a whole, looking at areas that needed water main replacement, storm replacement, sanitary work done. And that's kind of how we started to reapproach our capital plan in 2020. The first road we did was Mills Road. Here are some before and afters of Mills. And with all of these, you'll see not only is the road work done, but we're doing the crosswalks, the pavement, the, the ADA ramps along while we do the projects. Then we went to a neighborhood just north of here, Nichols, Whittier, and Watson. Here's some before and after pictures. These are all short stretches of road, about a quarter mile each, where we did a total reconstruct, replaced utilities along the way. These are those three street examples. We came back in 2020. We also did in 2020, we did a lot in 2020. We also did the Woodland Drive, and these are my favorite photos of a road that has complete failure before and after pictures. We did end up getting Project of the Year award for this project. I think that picture and these pictures show really nicely some of the benefits of the actual road. Moving to 2021, we looked again throughout the city at areas that needed utility work and total road reconstruction work. So we started up on Highland Drive, which is northwest or north central side of the city near Mill Pond Park. Here's some before and after pictures of Highland. Then we moved south closer to Pleasant Ridge Elementary School and did both Hillcrest and Lawson, and before and after pictures of those two streets. I'd like to point out that all of these projects that were completed, the road work did exceed the $500,000 in the funding there was just one source of funding. The millage was one source of funding for these. We obviously did utility work and road work. Our current projects include, as you are well aware, of the Pleasant Ridge and South Harris. These are just some existing examples of some of the pavement that's getting paved starting this week, actually. And then we're currently working towards Clark, which is connects Harris. Clark Street is located here between Harris and Maple, and we are working with MDOT to get some state funding to do a resurfacing of Clark. And now I'm going to turn over to Elle to talk a little bit about the funding sources for the street projects for the last 4 years.
Thank you so much, Chesha. Thank you all for letting us speak to you a little bit about where our millage dollars are going. So when you look at this slide actually is showing us how we funded all of our projects. So basically, it's not just funded with village dollars. We have what you would call, kind of a capital stack. We do other things like funding through bond proceeds, county millages. So you can see that while the millage presents a great portion of how we fund our projects, we also have many other ways that we're getting sourcing as well. I'd also like to point out that 1 mil is about $500,000 in revenue. That's what it equates to for us. If you look at the details of projects that were completed over $100,000, you can see the different projects that we've been working on and how much the dollar amount is. If you look at 2017 to when we get the millage, that's when we really start doing a lot of work to improve our roads, and you can see that the expenses support that. So this millage is really important to keep these projects going, and it also, you can see the work that they've done and how we've used the money how we've used the money for the mill over the last couple years.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about asset management and how we are going to treat our pavement as an actual asset. Kind of wanted to start off with just something we can all look at and understand with our roof, right? An untreated roof lasts about 20 years and you have to rip it off. You have water damage and leaks, very expensive. If you go over a prescribed maintenance program with it where you take care of any leaks, you inspect it regularly, you do upgrades and repairs to it, overall, the roof will last a lot longer. We have our roads rated in what is whatever PACER acronym, I don't know what it means, but it really is about paved surface condition. Here's a good is considered 6 to 10, fair 4 or 5, and poor 1 to 3. And to the left is a map of the city that shows where our roads are today, and the little pictures are what the asphalt actually looks like for those ratings.
Go back to that real quick there.
Yes, sir.
I think this is a very useful, powerful point, but there's at least one inaccuracy. You have red up on Woodland Drive that's just replaced.
It was rated prior to it being done.
Okay.
So and then I'll get to that when we talk about our overall rating. Here's our major streets. It's kind of an average PACER rating. I will point out that it was 2018. We started outsourcing the rating, so it might not be that big of a dip in our overall PACER rating. This is our major streets, and we do rate our streets, majors and locals separate. Here's our local streets, and it's looking like it's really trending down, but again, different point of view, different perspective could make a difference. And as you've seen in our previous slides about the projects we've been doing, those have all been fully R&R, mostly R&R projects, the heavy expense, heavy treatment projects. So we spend a lot more money and not necessarily using the lower cost repairs in the good range or fair range to get them up to good. Here's a little theory on pavement management. And you see in the 910, you really don't do anything with the road. It's basically brand new. Very good, little or nothing. You might see some joint sealing on that. We do routine crack filling in the good range and seal coating. I don't know, I know just outside the city limits up by the rec center, they did a seal coat. It's not always the most loved method, but it's very low cost and gets you a lot of miles, preserves the pavement. When you get into the pour, you got to do a lot of detail 7 and 8s, milling and filling, and then when you're into 3, 2s, and 1s, you're replacing the road. Picking the right fix, you want to try up on that top, the preventative maintenance, where you you do an overlay, then you take off the surface, mill it over, overlay it, then you do a full depth mill and overlay. At the end of the life of the road, if you've done these preventative maintenance practices, the road will last a lot longer and you'll invest a lot less money. These numbers on the dollars per yard are a few years old, so the dollars per yard would be higher, but the ratio is the same. If you let the road go all the way into, do nothing until you just have to reconstruct it, it costs significantly more than if you do the sealing and the overlays and the mill and fills, and you'll also keep the PACER rating a little bit higher on average over the life of the road. This is just a brief touch of where we're looking at doing capital. A lot of this is dependent on funding and the passage of this millage. And that went too fast. Any questions?
Very good. Why don't you hang tight? Tasha, Al, why don't you make sure, you can stay seated there, just make sure that cordless light, the green light is illuminated at the base. Let me start to my right and to my left. Councilmember Kraus, any questions for the city treasurer, engineer, or DPW director?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. So Director Searles, is there a place online where residents can see the planned roads into the future? I'm sure some might come up as emergencies, but for right now, is there a plan of what roads are next?
I don't actually think I have that published on
Okay.
the DPW page, but that's a great idea along with our map.
It might not be specifically enumerated on the DPW page, but if people were to access the capital improvement plan, they can see the schedule of not only upcoming road projects, but all forthcoming capital projects.
Okay.
And Mayor, that's in a spreadsheet, correct?
I believe it would appear, I believe it would appear on the website as a spreadsheet.
It's a question I get a
There's also a hard
lot.
copy at the front counter.
And we will be creating a page dedicated to this upcoming millage request that will include today's presentation as well as some simple questions and answers.
That's all I had. Great work. I mean, really, all of you.
Very good. Mr. Kamara Sulak, any questions for city staff?
Yeah, just a couple. Great pictures, and really appreciate all the numbers and everything coordinates and is really clear. Makes me wonder how much the square yards that it's increased in cost, depending upon, reconstruction or mill and fill. Is there any range that you can give us as far as how much the material cost has increased?
The actual last time that I looked, it's about a 1.1 million per lane mile for remove and replace for asphalt. That's utility, under road utility work as well,
Okay.
excluding sanitary.
All right. And then how does the decision process work as far as whether you do a complete reconstruction? Obviously, if it's all broken up like shown in the pictures, it's probably going to be, more involved, but versus a, mill and fill or an overlay, whether it's a light overlay or, different degrees of it. What goes into those decisions aside from we only have so many dollars?
Well, when you look at the surface, it doesn't tell the whole story. Some levels of cracked up road is worse than others, but what we'll do is take a core in the road, and then evaluate what is in the road bed as far as stone and aggregate material mixed in with organics, and then see how deep that is. So that, like, if you only have a couple inches left because you've left it exposed to the weather too long, then it's probably going to be a complete remove and replace. If you have a good enough road bed, sometimes you can just do a light overlay or a light mill and light fill. If the road bed's still good, you can actually do a full mill and overlay and still get the life without the huge expense. So it would go road by road, and we're going to look at the cores of what the road bed is.
Okay. So for a given length of road, what's the spacing of when you do the core? Or do you look back at the last time that any work was done on a street? Do we track that? And I know you inherited.
No, we would take them where it made sense. It necessarily isn't a prescribed distance. Mm-hmm. You're seeing a low spot, you're seeing some rutting. You'd want to take them where it made sense for that specific project.
Okay, great, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Very good. Mr. Seal, any questions for staff?
Yes, I do. Larry, these pictures show some significant improvement in these streets like Nichols, Highland, Hillcrest, Woodland Drive, and so on. And those roads are pretty shot before we tackle them. Are we still keeping up with the regular crack fill and so on some of the roads that are in better shape?
Yeah, we actually invested a lot in joint and crack fill this season, or this previous budget year, and we expect to do, not expect, we are going to do more going forward.
Do we have our own equipment to do that, or do we rely on a third-party vendor?
We contract that out.
Okay, all right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Dillon, any questions for staff?
Thank you. First, I want to say I really liked your analogy to the roof. I think that really helps people sort of visualize because everybody can sort of understand that. One of the things I was going to ask you about is truck traffic and how much that's impacting our roads right now, the wear and tear on them. And I'll talk specifically, because I always bring it up, about Austin Drive and the fact that it's perpetually has car carriers on a road that should never have car carriers on it. But it also doesn't have a curb, so they're just beating away the edge of that roadway. And I mean, if you look at it, it's completely gone now. But you see that in other areas too. And so is there anything that we can do to help? Is there, I mean, obviously, should we be rerouting some of our trucks so that they're not on certain roadways or anything like that?
Well, with our major roads, there's not as much controls there, right? Because we're getting the Act 51 funding for the major road. There's no doubt that axle weight has a direct impact on how long a road can last. And that's why it's so important to check that road bed before you commit to a project. But on our local streets, we have more control, but the majors are kind of like all-weather roads, and we do get the frost laws to protect when they're vulnerable, but we got to go into Lansing for that.
Right. So can you just explain for everyone's benefit the difference between a local road and a major road?
Well, it's a lot of thought goes into it up front, right, with traffic and type counts and movement counts. And to be totally honest with you, I can't tell you the whole formula. I don't know the whole formula.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, no, that's...
So then I just wanted to ask, so then what happens, what can the city do when we have utility companies that come and dig a big hole in the middle of our brand new roads? And then we had that, I think it was on Lawson, and we actually damaged a piece of equipment that fell into a piece of roadway that was not reconstructed in the right way. How do we ensure that our roads are going to last when we have third parties coming in and tearing them up?
Well, just recently, prior to Ben getting here, I was working with Steve and Tesha, and we put a lot more their money on the line for that, and set an actual inspection schedule. So as they're, because they have to fix their utility, as they come back and put it back together, we're actually getting reimbursed for going out on site to inspect and make sure that it's up to our standards.
Awesome.
Collecting cash bonds.
And cash road bonds, a little bit higher than $500.
Awesome. My last question is that when you look at the Pacers chart, it shows, I believe this would be Wildwood, basically all in yellow. And so that's a fair rating. Now, Wildwood's the one that had Rosebud in it. So are we anticipating any other large projects that are going to require major work?
Well, so council's aware, we did inspect all but a very, very small section of that storm system in that whole subdivision because there was some certain water conditions. But the good news is it appears to be in good shape, the storm sewer. Where you see the yellows, Ms. Dillon, we're going to start looking at some type of overlays and light mills and fills so that we can spread these dollars farther and increase and improve our average rating.
Awesome.
So before that one, I don't want to see that one go red. If we can keep that one from yellow back to green, we're going to buy ourselves a lot more time for a lot less dollars.
Perfect, and I'm going to end on that good note. Thank you.
Very good. To an earlier point, if between you and Tesha and anyone else you want to engage, please make sure that Kaiser rating for all of our streets is accurate before we disseminate it, because I think there were a few other inaccuracies on there, including, of course, Woodland Drive, which is no longer a red. Certainly
Right.
was, but as Tesha noted in the presentation, has seen a dramatic improvement in recent years. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbout, questions for city staff regarding this issue?
Just a couple. One of the ones, I know when you're doing this assessment, when I look at things like Colony Drive having to be done in really 10, 12 years, are you also doing an analysis to determine why those roads failed?
It could take a lot of effort to look back, because I would have to find out what was in the core. What did they find? How deep was the aggregate how deep and how clean was the aggregate base? We could look back, but it's usually using the wrong repair method, right? We're going with a full mill and fill, as opposed to maybe sometimes they did need to be completely removed and replaced.
I remember that was a completely build, which is kind of throwing you that one of our more priorities that we have to fix right now. Same thing, I think, when we talk about Harris Street out there, the failure that we had with the water main.
Yeah.
The other thing, when you mentioned about the mill and fills and layers, we have, we will not be doing it where you put the asphalt on top of the apron. On the
No, I don't think that's very well received from anybody.
Good.
Burying the
That was a
curbs.
past- Yeah, that
Yeah.
was a past practice, and we ended up having to rip out an entire
Yeah.
curbing on mills because of that.
Yeah, usually no one ends up happy with that.
Other than that, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the investments in Kaiser, because when you look at some of the streets on here, some are identified as red. Those are the ones I think we're gonna hear more about, depending on who's living on them, they will be the ones that probably do that. Thank you.
Mr. Delorco, questions for staff?
I think all my questions have been asked and answered.
Easy enough. Well, thank you all, appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll discuss this item further under new business. We proceed now to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for discussion.
Moved as distributed.
Move to approve. How about as submitted, Mr. Seal?
Submitted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Del Orco. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business, item 21-177, Salt Springs Development and Monroe Street Sidewalk Project. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 27, 2022 memo from City Engineer Humphreys, and to approve or not to approve the contract overage of $22,520.75 to Fonson Incorporated. We have Incorporated on there twice. My apologies. For Salt Spring Park Development and Monroe Street Sidewalk Project.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by Gearbout to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulek. City Engineer Humphreys, the floor is yours.
Okay, yes, I'm here to talk about Salt Springs, and with me is Scott Fisher with MCI, or Midwestern Consulting. And this project, actually, I'm sure you're all aware of it, has a long history. I actually didn't know about this until I started here late last fall. I didn't even know about this park, and that's one of the cool things I think about this project actually now, is opened up for a place that's open to the public. What I think is really, this is a smaller project, a few $100,000, but it really combined a lot of aspects. We got a new pathway connectivity of sidewalks along Monroe Street. We combined a DNR grant for the actual park development. We got brownfield development for the contaminated soils located on this on Monroe Street. So it pulled all of these pieces together, and I think that's one of the reasons why this project has been on the books for a few years, and it finally got built this spring. As you guys are all well aware, it was bid in the fall. Fonson was low bid. It was awarded to be completed this spring, and I want to thank MCI tremendously for dealing with all of the aspects of getting it built this spring. One, at Fonson was definitely facing increasing costs as all contractors. I definitely think if we had rebid this spring, we would have gotten much more expensive costs. So I think Fonson pulling in for only $25,000 over, with when most of that is actually due to soil overages. So the most of this overage is due to additional soils we hauled off site. I think we estimated about $50,000 in soil remediation, and we spent about $100,000. So you can see how a lot of that is just in the hauling and stuff with that for the soils. So overall, that's what I'm here tonight. There's some pictures of the project completed. Scott's here to answer any questions, but we're looking for, approval to get this project closed out in fiscal year 22 as we committed to the state.
Excellent. I thought that was a very good synopsis, Engineer Humphreys, and this is what has taken place there in that vicinity in recent years is very positive for the community. As you noted, it was a long time coming, but it's positive nevertheless. We do have a guest here. Do you care to make any obligatory remarks for the record before we open up for questions? Easy enough.
Mayor, if I may too add also that we are intending to request an increase to the brownfield grant that we received to help cover the overage on soil costs. So it's possible that this overage may be fully reimbursed.
Very good. Yep, thank you for noting that for the record. Are there questions for staff or our guest? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just related to this, as we anticipate with the reconstruction of the waste treatment plant, do we intend to have another grant clear? Because there's more contaminated soil in that whole area.
Well, any additional work that would be done there, absolutely. The first place I would recommend we go is to the County Brownfield Authority to discuss with them how they may be willing to support the project.
Okay, just because of that area.
We are considering, it's definitely still on our radar, to look at a crosswalk on the opposing side of the street that would, to make it happen, would require some support as well.
Thank you.
On that issue, I'd like to personally make that a priority. I think that's important and should be something that we should move forward on in the not too distant future. So just for the record. Additional questions, Councilmember Dillon?
Thank you. I would like to just echo that was a big concern that I had when we were working on the sidewalk. Reading from Huntington Woods is that we have created a sidewalk that goes to nowhere. There is no crosswalk. We do know that in the past, that tends to be a point in which there is high-speed cars going through there, and I don't want to create a false sense of security for people crossing the street there. I would like that to be an absolute priority for the city to get some sort of a crosswalk there and to have signage associated with it so we can start slowing that traffic down before it gets to that point. I know that there's been issues because of the Adient property and trying to connect through that, across that, by that, everything like that, but I do think that we do have some sort of an obligation to figure out a safe means of getting people from the west side to the east side of that sidewalk. Thank you.
That's a good point. And of all the pieces that came together, that's the one piece that just did it.
Right.
And Adient's a big part of it. And, but I will say from being out there, people are actually absolutely using that sidewalk to come from Huntington Woods. I mean, we saw runners, just from being, so the new sidewalk is definitely in use, and it would just be, this project would be 100%, if we could get that one little turn.
Right.
And it's such a little bit, yet such a large undertaking because the contaminated soils and the property owner.
Right. And just to end on that, City Manager, do you have any idea when they're going to be striping Monroe Street? Whatever happened with that? Because I think that would be a big piece.
That's a Scott.
Well, let Scott talk about that.
We have been contractors running behind on other projects. He has not provided, they're supposed to get started on Wednesday with general striping throughout the city. They haven't provided when they're actually going to be striping Monroe Street, but they had anticipated 2 total weeks to complete all work. So before the end of August would be my best estimate.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
If they're going to start striping on Wednesday, can we make sure to get that on social media? Do a blast on that? Yeah, you're on that? Okay. Okay. Well, let's try to confirm that because that's been dragging on a little bit and we want to get that done. Okay. Very good. Thank you for that, Scott. Any additional questions? Mr. Seal.
Yes, a mention was made about lack of sidewalk at the Adient property. I think it'd be great for us to pursue them further too, to see what needs to be done to get that infill done there, so that people don't have to cross the street, regardless of whether a crosswalk's there or not.
I believe the city manager has attempted to have conversations with the representatives from Adient. I think it would be great if we could get somebody to come back later this year to give us an update on the remediation and maybe talk about potential partnerships on the sidewalk. I don't mean to be pejorative, but I don't think the response you have gotten has been as maybe as conciliatory as it had been in the past. Is that fair?
That's a fair assessment.
Okay.
I would say at this point, if the city is considering a sidewalk on the west side of the street, the take would be, it would have to be at our full cost, with no support. And the challenge there is that because the cause of the contaminant is known and the responsible party is identified, the Brownfield Authority may not even support those efforts, at least financially.
All right. Understood. Any additional questions? Tasha, thank you again.
Thank you.
Is there any subsequent discussion on the motion? Then it's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Kamir Sulak to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-180, contract for prosecution services. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 25th, 2022 memo from City Manager O'Toole and to approve or not to approve the agreement for prosecution services with Bauer, Hunt and Associates, PC.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. City Manager, the floor is yours.
Really, this is just a continuation of existing services with a little bit more flexibility in terms of the overall scope. Mr. Ojak was previously subcontracting underneath the Dickinson Wright contract that we have for general legal services, and it was determined that really it's in the best interest of the city at this point to move forward with a separate contract so that we can use Mr. Ojak for other services such as enforcement of our dangerous buildings ordinance, where we'll be setting up a hearing and a separate process for that.
Very good. Yeah, over the years, I've been very impressed by Mr. Ojak's service, his dedication, his knowledge. I think that his intellect and abilities could be better leveraged in the ensuing years, and I'm very happy and enthusiastic to continue our relationship and to have him continue to take the lead on the prosecution of misdemeanors. For my edification and for the public's, City Manager O'Toole, was this matter discussed at any of the meetings of the Legal Services Review Committee?
It was discussed at one of the meetings, but mostly just as we knew we didn't want to go out for separate prosecution services because we were very satisfied with the service we have, so.
Okay, well, let me defer then to the two council reps on that committee. Mr. Gearbaugh, anything you'd like to add on this subject?
No, we've just shown that he's proven his record and that, we've been consistent with it. Looking forward with him prosecuting some more of the misdemeanors and issues related to code violations.
Yep. Councilmember Dillon, anything you'd like to add?
I think Mr. Gearbaugh just said it, that we were very happy with the services we've got. He knows our city, he knows our ordinances, and continuing, I think, is in the best interest of the city.
Very good. Questions? Mr. Commissioner Sulak.
Yeah, so the way I look at it, this appears to be a better use of our funds, and the flexibility and opportunity cost that you've taken advantage of. So unless I'm looking at that incorrectly, I think that's a really good move.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I'll give credit to Community Development Director Harrington for helping to identify this need and make much more recent use of it than I think it's been in the past.
All right. I like this move. I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Very good. Any additional questions or discussion on the motion? It's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-181, resolution to approve street millage. This will be a motion to adopt or not to adopt the resolution and direct staff to place language on the November ballot for voter consideration.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved by CO to adopt, seconded by Gearbaugh. City Manager O'Toole, obviously, we just had a presentation this evening. This matter was discussed 2 weeks ago. Is there anything you'd like to add for the record?
Just wanted to add that we're once again asking council to consider, and then ultimately, if council so chooses to adopt this resolution, the voters to consider a 3-year extension of the existing 1 mil for street improvement projects. We will have more information available on our website in the coming days about what you heard today regarding that presentation, some frequently asked questions, but certainly any residents that have questions or concerns about how those dollars are being used or how we plan to use them in the future are strongly encouraged to reach out to my office.
Very good. The other thing that I would recommend, I will be enthusiastically supporting this motion. I helped to spearhead the initial street millage in 2018. We did have a 3-page fact sheet that we produced in 2018 that I think should be updated. It was very clear and concise and to the point. It was a very useful resource for our voters. And then secondarily, I think it would be, I think it's incumbent upon us, to host at least 1 or 2 town halls dedicated specific to this subject in the late summer or early fall at various times of the day and week in a variety of locations. I think in 2018 we did 3, 1 here at City Hall, 1 at the library, and 1 at the Senior Center. And I would recommend something similar this year as well. Questions or comments? I'll begin with Mr. Gearbaugh.
Ms. O'Toole, if you could explain why we're going for 3 years and not 5 years after just looking at a list of like 5 years plus improvements?
Well, one is the fact that we don't have a great handle on where capital costs are going with inflation right now. We have a strong plan for the next 3 years that we feel those dollars can be effectively used for. We don't want to make a commitment to residents that we can't deliver on. So when we say that we're going to ask for those dollars for 3 years, we're going to find a good use for those dollars in those 3 years. When you start getting out to years 4, 5, 6, without updating our PASER rating yet, without moving to a true asset management-based system, and Engineer Humphries can certainly chime in if she feels the need, we don't want to promise what we can't deliver.
Thank you.
Mr. Seal?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I was on this council when we passed the 2018 millage. Prior to that, we sat here hoping and hoping and hoping the state was going to increase the amount of money they sent us for paving, and it didn't happen. So we finally took it in our own hands, and I think we've achieved wonderful results. Thank you to all the staff who've been involved in this. I think what you've done with the amount of money that the citizens gave us has been truly amazing. And I would encourage people to see the efficacy of this going forward.
Very good. Mr. Mayor Sulek?
Thank you. I'd like to echo Mr. Seo's thoughts. And then for the public, I think it's important to highlight that this is for renewal for 2024 through 2026 and is really critical for future capital improvement planning, and that I will be supporting this.
Good. Councilmember Dillon, I believe you had your hand up?
I did, thank you. I think that what I was going to say has been said by the others. I just hope that residents do see the value in this. It's a near-term solution. You see it every day as you travel our roads, what these dollars are going for. And so I think it's been a wise use of money, and I think it will continue to be. So I do encourage residents to wholeheartedly consider supporting it. And just from a housekeeping issue, there is a typographical issue in the middle of the resolution.
I can always count on you, Janet. Where's the?
What is the?
It's right in the middle. It's the important, it wasn't changed.
Oh, the title still hasn't changed.
Yes.
So state the change for
Oh,
the record,
I
please.
apologize. It says that it's controlled substances enforcement.
Quite the error. That change will be made without objection.
Thank you.
Councilmember Delorco?
Yeah, I think the presentation is indicative of the fact that these dollars have been well utilized in the years past, and I certainly am in favor and support of the millage, and I'll be voting for it tonight as well as at the polls. I do have a question about how the capital improvement plan or asset management plan would be impacted were the millage not to prevail.
Well, certainly we would have to look at cutting projects. This millage is essential gap financing for a number of projects. As you can see, it touched numerous projects just in the 3 years that we've implemented it thus far, and we have it already planned for what we will be using those dollars for this year and next. If the vote is not approved, we will have to review what projects are being eliminated as a result.
Okay. So the future of our roads depends on this.
Definitely. Anything else? Any subsequent discussion? Then we have a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded by Gearbout to adopt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-182, MERS changes. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 25th, 2022 memo from City Treasurer Cole and to approve or not to approve the corrected addendums effective January 1, 2021 for the city's MERS defined benefit, defined contribution, and hybrid retirement plan provisions.
Approve, acknowledge and approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Kraus. Is there a second?
No, second.
Seconded by Mayor Sulek. City Manager O'Toole, you chatted with me briefly before the meeting this evening. Do you want to make an initial comment and then turn it over to the City Treasurer?
Certainly. I would just like to say, acknowledge the hard work of Treasurer Cole on this. She identified an issue within our payroll reporting system, noting that something wasn't correctly being accounted for, and worked extremely swiftly to make the correction. I know the packet that you have in front of you all is a daunting little stack of changes there, but I'm happy to report, thanks to her efforts, we are going to be able to clean this up relatively quickly, painlessly, and without financial consequence.
What a wonderful compliment. City Treasurer, thank you for your efforts on this. Why don't you come to the podium, and if there are additional comments that you would like to make for the record, we would welcome those.
I believe that, the memo states what what happened, and we're just lining up our policies and procedures that have been approved by council to match what the addendum is. Just so you know, in 2020 was the first year that MERS implemented these addendums, so it was the first time that we had ever signed anything like this, and that was just their own policies and procedures that they were cleaning up so that they knew, and had the council adopt what was being prepared and how the plans were being kind of implemented, and they were being, how retirees were being paid. So that's why this was new, and I think that there was just it just didn't line up perfectly. So MERS has been a great partner. They've been very cooperative, and they're willing to retroactively date the new addendums to match up with what our policies are.
Excellent. Are there questions for the city? Of course, you could direct your questions to the city manager or the city treasurer. Mr. Seal.
Just so I understand completely, this is to remove from the final average compensation the sick payout accruals? Is that true?
And in lieu payments.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Kamara Sulek?
Just a quick comment. Thank you for so quickly making a mark for this city of Saline here. Much appreciated, and it was really good reading. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Mr. Gearbaum?
Not a question, but just, it would be helpful for us, I think, in council. We've had a number of changes with MERS, and just understanding everything, how MERS works for us and for our staff and our employees. It's just, there were things that we talked, even when we were doing negotiations, of what applies for which type of employee and which plan works for which. So if we could maybe have some kind of a summary of that approach at some point in the future. It's difficult to understand when you're trying to negotiate something that even the negotiators aren't quite sure about it either. So, thanks.
Thank you very much for the suggestion.
Any additional questions? Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. So sort of piggybacking to that, just for my own clarification, did this touch each group, like each union, the non-unions? So it sort of hit upon everybody, so we've kind of cleaned house and we know it didn't impact any of our contracts, did it? Any of our union contracts?
Maybe I'll let City Manager O'Toole speak to that.
During our TPOM contract negotiations with the creation of this hybrid plan, we did expressly state that we'd offer parity with the existing contract, but that was under the premise that we believed these payments weren't going to be included. So we would be correcting that error with this, and I will have that conversation, or am in the process of having that conversation.
Okay, so we didn't,
But it's not specifically stated, these types of terms aren't specifically stated in the contract, this level of detail.
but if this was the policy that was in place at the time that that contract was signed, are we going to be held to the previous terms or anything like that?
Our position is that we would not be, because that's not actually the policy. Council did not adopt a policy to change how it accounts for final payouts.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely, and these are retroactively dated, so it will be as if the other addendum never existed.
Any additional questions for the city manager or city treasurer? Al, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colleen. Any subsequent discussion on the motion? Then it's been properly moved by Kraus, seconded by Kamara Sulek to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to the last new business item of the evening, which is 22-183, Water and Sewer Fee Waiver, Maple Oaks Court. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 19, 2022 memo from City Manager O'Toole and to approve or not to approve the waiver of fees for a reduction of $1,475.70 for water connection fees, $3,159 for sewer connection fees for 673 Maple Oaks Court, and a waiver of fees for a reduction of $1,475.70 for water connection fees and $3,159 for sewer connection fees for 621 Maple Oaks Court.
Move to acknowledge?
Moved by Dillon, simply to acknowledge. Is there a second?
Second.
Was that seconded by CO? Thank you, sir. City Manager O'Toole, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Council previously considered a larger request from this developer for the waiver of fees for all units in the development. Ultimately, council decided at that time to just move forward with consideration of the commons areas. There was kind of a split direction from council at that time. to have staff report back on what actual usage was for those commons areas. And that is articulated in my memo that we did identify with the ones commons area that is built out and metered, that usage is especially low in this particular instance. And so it would be council's discretion whether they believe that this qualifies under our ordinance for a fee waiver.
Very good. And the petitioner is also here this evening. How are you, sir? Good. Was there any comment that you would like to make for the record this evening?
I apologize for how I'm dressed.
You're
Bill
fine.
couldn't come tonight because he had to watch his mother-in-law, who's aging and elderly. I'm just here to answer questions. Happy to be in your presence again.
Very good. Well, why don't you hang tight in the event that there are questions that are best addressed by you. Questions from the dais. I'll start with Mr. Seal.
Yes, sir. This other prospective address, 673 Maple Oaks Court, is that on the north side of the railroad tracks?
It's on the north side of the railroad tracks of the cul-de-sac. It's the second condominium building built for the IDD residents.
Okay.
And again, both of them have a common area that only has a half bath in it.
All right, so that's being built at this time.
We're about to get a C of O, I think, tomorrow or the next day.
All right, very good, thank you.
And it's almost identical to the similar building that's in the front along Maple Road.
Very, very similar, yes.
Yep.
All right.
Looks nice, by the way. I drove through there last week. Additional questions from the dais for the city manager or for our guest? Councilmember Dillon.
So just to clarify, there's living quarters within the structure, and then this is a common area in which all residents can use the area. Is there a kitchen in that area?
There is a small kitchenette. I don't believe it even has a sink, if I remember correctly. Just has a little countertop, some cabinets, and a small under-counter refrigerator.
City manager, can you sort of explain, I apologize, maybe this would have been better for Mr. Harrington, what a common area is, like how our ordinance is written?
Yeah, that's going to be a better question for Community Development Director Harrington. I was not here when council first adopted the ordinance that kind of governs council's discretion in waiving these type of fees, so I can't really speak to what the intent was. I know there's some specific reference in the ordinance to group living, such as nursing homes, but specifically excluding foster care facilities, I believe. So it seems like the intent may have been geared towards that type of use.
Okay. But it's different than a separate standalone structure, like a clubhouse at a pool in a condominium development.
A commons area?
A commons area. So, I mean, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to equate it and what point of reference we have to look at for a comparison.
I can do some ordinance research.
I mean,
real
the
quick,
other
or-
thing is I wouldn't be opposed to tabling it and, having a discussion
I would-
later on
yeah.
if we feel as though we need more information.
I would prefer, the chair would prefer, if that's the direction, as opposed to tabling a motion to postpone to a date certain, which would be our next regular meeting, which I believe is on the 15th. I believe that's more than enough time to get clarification from the Community Development Director. Mr.
Didn't it
Seal.
have to do, Your Honor, with low water use based on the fact that it was in a common area of a building that was commonly used by a number of different people? I think that was the purpose of this lower capping.
It might prove helpful to look at what was done with Linden Square and with Brecken Village. Linden Square would be the one that's most applicable within the last 5 years, yeah. And I do recall there being some accommodation for that. but I can't remember exactly how.
Any additional questions for our guest or for city staff regarding this issue? Okay, then we have a motion on the floor simply to acknowledge receipt. It's been moved by Dillon, seconded by CO. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. And what's your pleasure? Motion to approve, not to approve, or to postpone to a date certain?
Postpone
To a date certain?
So postpone action until August 15th, is that correct, Councilmember Dillon?
Yes.
Mr. Seal, would you, Mr. Seal, excuse me, Mr. Gearbaugh, would you be amenable to seconding that?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Is there any additional discussion? And City Manager O'Toole, you're clear on what the ask and the inquiry is?
Yes, though, if there are specific questions, if you could forward those to me and Community Development Director Harrington so that we can be prepared to answer those at that meeting, that would be appreciated.
And just for our guest edification, this does mean we will likely act on this issue and develop consensus at our next regular meeting in 2 weeks. If there's nothing further, we do have a motion moved by Dillon, seconded by Gearba to postpone until consideration until August the 15th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is commission, committee, and task force reports from council members. I'll actually start to my left and move to my right this time. Mr. Delorco, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yeah, I'm pleased to report that after tonight's meeting, the consent agenda added another member to our environmental commission, so now we have a full docket. We have all fully 7 position staff now, and there's only 1 non-resident, so we're very pleased about that. Environmental Commission participated, several members of the Environmental Commission participated in the event over the weekend at Saline High School with Washtenaw County for recycling and e-waste, and it was wildly popular. There were cars lined up all the way around the school and out into the street, and there was a nonstop flow of old electronics as far back as the 80s coming in, and I think it was a good event for the community, and a lot of us had the opportunity to participate in that, and it was great. The Code Review Commission spent the bulk of its time deliberating over a rental property ordinance that we're working on. We had a guest attend, Mike Radzik, who has a company that we're consulting with that has authored this ordinance. It's very detailed. It covers a lot of ground, and we're very excited to bring this to council very soon.
Good. Excellent. Look forward to that. Mr. Gearba, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Just for Planning Commission, we met this past week to approve our first recreational, medical and recreational special use request that'll be coming to council. It'll be next in 2 weeks or not.
We'd have to confirm with Community Development Director, but I suspect there might be a number of marijuana-related issues on our next agenda.
Okay. And then we also talked about the master plan for our, the planning for the community. We'll be establishing a small steering committee to basically go through the plan and then set up a couple of town hall meetings somewhere in town to discuss those issues, because we really want to have the community's input in terms of where we want to be in 5-10 years.
Yep. That's an excellent point, which is sort of a call to action to City Council and to the community. As you hear people inquire or even sometimes lament or complain about the state of affairs in Saline and where we're headed and a particular type of development or the preservation of green space or recreation areas, if they really want to have an impact, encourage them to attend one of these upcoming town halls or public forums we have to revise our master plan. That's a really important time for them to make their voices and opinions known, because it could be incorporated into revisions in our master plan, which is sort of the guiding document for the ensuing years. So thank you for that, Mr. Gearba. Councilmember Dillon, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
No, at this time, ZBA and Historic District have not met.
Very good. Mr. Seo?
Just the announcement that there's a cemetery board meeting coming up a week from Thursday on August the 11th. It'll be held at 3 p.m. Is that correct, Terry? Here in the council workroom.
Very good. Mr. Kamir Sulek, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Surprisingly, I have nothing to report.
Okay, fair enough. And Councilmember Kraus?
Thank you. I do, with arts and culture, I just want to give a shout out for our Art Around Saline subcommittee task force. Jen Hensel, Tamara Moore were our co-chairs, Helen Clark, Ann Stofflet, Linda Terhard, Jennifer Vivkanon, and Bruce Westlake all worked very hard this year on, I don't want to use the word judging the art because it was all beautiful, but they had to pick, and it's all around town. You'll see out on our buildings. Also the Facebook page, we're going to be doing a series of a little more deeper dive into each artist and how they're related to Saline and their work. So I'd encourage people to check out our Facebook page and just see what the art around town actually means, who did it, their connection to Saline. So that was a big deal that all got up and about. It's really pretty. The second thing is, just like Mr. Delorco said, we also are almost to capacity. We have 2 more applicants in process, and then we'll be full. So thanks to the volunteers and the people who are stepping up to be involved. That's
Very good. Reports or other announcements, Mr. Delorco?
I have none.
Mr. Gearba?
Just want to plug the yard sale out at the Rensselaer Farm on August 12th and 13th. We're looking forward to having everyone come out for our big fundraiser. Thank you.
Very good. I have two. One, just a reminder that I think it's my 9th annual senior conference will be held at the Saline Area Senior Center on August the 12th. Starts at about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and runs till about 2. That includes breakfast, lunch, some breakout sessions, and a government panel. Any Saline Area senior is welcome to attend, but you do have to RSVP, so please call the senior center just as soon as possible. We do cut it off at about 90 to 100 seniors. And then I wanted to make an observation. I'm not sure if anyone else was there. I did communicate this with Mr. Gearbaugh over the weekend, but I did attend the food truck rally down at Mill Pond Park that was put on by MI Homes for the benefit of Saline Area Social Services. I actually viewed it as an opportunity for some community-based group to take that initiative or concept and run with it. I bet when I was there, and I was only there for probably 30 to 45 minutes, there had to be between 500 and 1,000 people down there. I thought our police department did an excellent job managing the situation. Officer Snook was down there along with Chief Radzik, and then Officer Gauthier was on duty, made several rounds. People were polite and conducted themselves in an orderly manner, but we could have probably had triple the number of food carts, probably beverages and more activities. So that's just something, some food for thought, pun intended, but I will be talking to some community-based groups about maybe making that an annual event, or maybe even doing it multiple times throughout the summer, because I think there's an opportunity there to more profoundly benefit maybe some local nonprofits or community causes. So that's all I've got. Councilmember Dillon, any reports or announcements?
Just quickly, that's just to follow up, we had received an email from our PR general, Sarah Macy, that she's going to be videotaping each of our committees and commissions about what they are, just quick snippets, and also special projects. So just a heads up to everyone's committees to make sure that we get in touch with her so that they can get those done. Ben Goodman's also working on that project, and this is something that we had talked about through the Cable Commission, and these are things that we'll be airing, not just on social media, but on our cable channel to get people a little bit more familiar with our committees, and hopefully to help build that pool of volunteers for them, not just sitting on boards, but participating in community events. The other thing I would like to make mention of is, as Ms. Krause had mentioned about Facebook pages, sorry. I think that at some point as a city, we've got to kind of decide to find some aspect of our Facebook page names to relate them back to the city so that everybody sort of knows, that there's one-stop shopping that you can find them. Because I think Environmental Commission is actually called Saline Be Green. And then things like Historic District doesn't really reference that it's a part of the city. Things like that, just so that people kind of have that ready reference and can sort of find it all in one place. And I think that's it.
Okay. Mr. Seal, any reports or announcements?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. We're just initial stages of setting up the visit next year to our sister city in Lindenberg, Germany. So for anybody who might be interested, it's a wonderful opportunity to get to know those folks who live in the city of Lindenberg. It is a beautiful town in the south central portion of Germany. You can look out the window and see the Alps in the distance. It's not very far from Lake Constance, and they're planning a beautiful visit for us. I believe the dates are June 17th through June 30th, but there will be further information to follow. For anybody who's interested, keep this in mind, give me a call. We'd be happy to fill you in on further details.
Very good. Mr. Commander Sulak, any reports or announcements?
Nothing further, no.
Councilmember Kraus.
Just a quick shout to the rec center. I heard from a couple people this week that the new weights are up and running, and they were pretty impressed. And so we received thanks via these few people for approving that money for
Very
the.
good.
Yeah.
Yep, I got some pictures. I was there yesterday and was talking to Mr. Goodman, and we'll be talking to staff tomorrow. We'll be doing a promotional video sharing the changes that were made and encouraging people to join up, or at a minimum come out and check out the rec center if they haven't in some time. So, yep, all the feedback I received was very positive as well. Let's transition then, before we entertain public comments and convene into closed session. An updated report from the Legal Services Working Group. They have a forthcoming recommendation. I'll start with the city manager and then ask for comments from our two council reps, which would be Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh and Councilmember Dillon.
So the Legal Services Committee has met, I believe, 5 times now. During those conversations, we've launched the RFP and received bids back. We closed the RFP at the end of May. We received 7 responses. Of the 7 responses, the committee selected to move forward with inviting 5 for interviews. From there, we narrowed it down to 2 for a second round interview, and the committee does now have a recommendation to make to council regarding how it would like to move forward with the services. They actually found that each of the 2 finalists that we interviewed had value in the types of services that they could offer to the city, and their recommendation moving forward is that the city contract with Clark Hill for labor services, which is our current labor service provider, as well as bond counsel and finance questions and real estate and tax appeals, and then broadly, if it is required of us, as a litigation firm. And then for other day-to-day legal services, especially as a liaison to bodies like the Planning Commission and the Code Review Task Force or Committee, moving to work with Gianmarco, Mullins, and Horton. We were very impressed by the attorneys that they brought to that meeting and their responsiveness to our questions and the scenarios that were presented. So I have engaged with both of those firms to ask them to provide a draft contract that outlines that scope of services, and I expected that council may have some feedback regarding whether they'd like formal presentations from those 2 firms to this body, or simply to have a conversation as part of the conversation around a contract agreement.
I would defer to our representatives on the Legal Services Working Group. I'm not sure that a formal presentation would be necessary, but if the plan is to have contracts to review at our next council meeting, at a minimum, I think some representation from the 2 firms would be appropriate to be able to make some obligatory comments and maybe a more abbreviated presentation for the public record. Okay. Mr. Gearbaugh, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably the best way to handle it. There's not a whole lot that we need to understand from them, but maybe we would have the questions. And it would be helpful for us to actually meet the individuals that we'll probably be working with the most. And as to the whole process, I believe we did well in how we approached it. And from the 7 that applied, we had some that didn't necessarily complete the information properly, so they were eliminated. And that's kind of the firms you don't want. We want to make sure that we're moving forward with excellent service. And, you know, the debate right now is on how we incorporate or incur the expense and the approach, and I think what's being presented going forward will be a better way for us to use our services better and hopefully be more cost effective.
Very good. Councilmember Dillon, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. Yeah, I just think that the city manager did an excellent job of kind of just explaining the process. I thought it was an excellent process, and it definitely should be the model moving forward on things the way that it works. I do want to make sure that we mention that Chief Radzik and local attorney Dennis Valente also sat on that committee, and their contributions were very much appreciated. But it was a great process, and what we did learn from it was that the city has a lot of needs in very specific ways, and so we were able to find firms that could really satisfy those, where we didn't have to feel as though it's, you know, we have various options of attorneys that we can look to for answers. So I'm very excited about that. The other big thing is the restructuring of the payment process. I think that's going to be very beneficial to the city moving forward. And so I think that bringing them in, we've met with them twice now in person, and I think giving the rest of council the benefit of meeting them and seeing face-to-face who will be our contacts could be beneficial.
So thank you both. Let me ask this question then of the city manager. Is it your intent to have us review and approve contracts at our next meeting on August the 15th?
I am hopeful that I will have the contracts back with enough time to review them myself to get them on that agenda. But just in case, it may be the first meeting in September.
Okay, so here would be my recommendation, regardless of whether it's the 15th of August or the 12th of September. Whenever we're prepared to vote on and review those contracts, maybe if we could have some representation from both firms, not only attend those meetings, but maybe gather a little bit early, where we could have kind of an informal meet and greet. We could maybe have some light refreshments, but maybe, we don't have work meetings currently scheduled for either of those 2 dates, so maybe have them plan to arrive at about 6:30, and then they can make formal presentations, albeit more abbreviated presentations during the regular meeting that begins at 7.
Perfect.
Mr. Gearbox?
Just considering that's over a month from now, is that going to be any concern with you in terms of our ability to meet legal services or have our legal services met?
No, we've, Dickinson Wright has been happy to provide us with ongoing services despite our contract having been expired on a month-to-month basis, so. And we are working with them on a few issues, which we will discuss later tonight.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Kamara Sulek?
Yeah, just a reminder to vote tomorrow, primary election. Make sure you get your vote on. It's easy to forget. So, city staff will be here extended hours, and looking forward to people exercising their right to vote.
Very good. If there's nothing further, is there any other business to come before Saline City Council this evening? Please note our upcoming meetings. And at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to convene into closed session to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute, in particular for the purpose of discussing strategy connected to the negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement, and consider the purchase of real property. City Council will reconvene into regular session at the conclusion of the closed session. Is there a motion to convene in closed session?
So moved.
Moved by Gearboss, seconded by Kraus. The clerk will please call the roll.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes, we are convening into closed session then at 8:06 p.m. Absolutely have to. Let's, Chair will be happy to entertain a motion to reconvene into regular session at
So moved.
8:55 PM. Seconded by Kamara Sulek, or moved by Kamara Sulek, seconded by Gearball. The clerk will please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Yep.
Yes, we are reconvening into regular session. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 25th memo from Assistant City Manager Getzman and to approve or not to approve the COAM collective bargaining agreement effective July 21, 2022 through June 30th, 2026.
Move to acknowledge.
And
And
to
accept.
approve or not to
And
approve? Okay, moved by CO to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulek. Is there any discussion on the motion? There appears to be none. Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to our subsequent motion, which is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the July 26, 2022 memo from City Manager O'Toole and to approve or not to approve the land purchase agreement for 207 Monroe Street in the amount of $200,000 and to authorize, not authorize the mayor to sign and to direct or not to direct staff to transfer funds from the assigned legislative changes for the purposes of executing the purchase.
Motion to acknowledge and accept?
It's actually going to be,
Or
Mr.
approve.
Kamara Sulek, an acknowledge, approve, and direct, if you're comfortable with that.
So moved.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there an authorize in there?
Yep.
Oh, I missed it. Thank you. So let me just restate that for the record, Mr. Kamara Sulek, to make sure you're good with moving the motion, because it's all bolded. So it'll be a motion to acknowledge, to approve, to authorize, and direct.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Seconded by Del Orco. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. Just for clarification, the money that's coming to purchase this property is coming from our unassigned fund balance?
No, from our assigned legislative changes. Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
that it will-
then,
So that will not reduce this year's fund balance.
okay. And so then are we going to, if this property were to be sold, will that money be returned to that fund? Is it going into general fund dollars?
That would be council's direction at that time, how they want to direct funds, but.
Okay,
yeah.
at that point, thank you.
Let me just say that I appreciate staff and legal counsel's time in pursuing this purchase agreement with the current property owner for 207 Monroe Street. If this motion is approved and if the closing is executed, the city's first and primary goal will be to improve the safety and aesthetics of that site. Secondarily, we look forward to moving expeditiously to find a competent, qualified developer who can execute a quality project on that site. So we will be sharing more information in the ensuing weeks, but I will be enthusiastically supporting the motion that was moved by Kamara Sulek, seconded by Councilmember Del Orco. Is there any additional discussion? Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor on the motion to acknowledge, approve, authorize, and direct signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. If there's no additional business to come before Saline City Council this evening, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:59 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Kraus. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulek. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, this meeting is adjourned.